talking to parents about sensitive conversations like elder law planning can lead to some really difficult conversations, but very important ones. I'm with Foster Swift attorneys Nick Camargo and Matt Fedor to talk about this and where we start with these difficult conversations. Matt, let's start with you. When talking about these conversations, oftentimes people might think that it's too late to start planning. What are your thoughts on that and how attorneys are able to help?
Julie, that's a great question. We get a lot of calls, a lot of inquiries from clients, and they kind of run through the scenario and tell us where they're at. And oftentimes what we find is that this is the first time they're addressing this issue. So what we try to do is, with our current clients, we try to encourage them to start having that communication early. The earlier you start having the conversation, the easier it is because it's not a crisis mode. So communication between the family members is key. Even though that conversation may be difficult, we understand that. But you just kind of have to pull the Band-Aid off and start talking about what happens down the road if mom or dad become incapacitated or develop dementia or some other mental infirmity. Communication between the family members can alleviate a lot of problems as well. Most of the items that we see that rise to the level of litigation where we're in court and siblings are fighting and family members are fighting is directly due to the fact that there was little to no communication prior to that situation. But essentially, it doesn't matter when you've realized that you've got an issue or you need to talk to somebody, you need to call an elder law attorney as soon as you realize that and have that conversation. It's never too late. We can always help, but the question is whether or not you're going to be closing out any options. The earlier you have the conversation, the more options there are. It's like I said, it's never too late, but you definitely, the earlier you start, the better.
As Matt was talking, I was thinking the exact same thing that he was saying, and the words, it's never too late, sort of hit me and resonated with me, and that's what we want to let people know. We can't encourage enough early communication. We can't encourage enough early planning. We want people to come in as soon as possible before there are issues. And the reason that we're so passionate about that and telling people that is because we deal on a regular basis with people who weren't approached or didn't approach, I should say, an attorney early enough on. And we see all of the havoc that it can sort of cause within a family. It doesn't mean we can't help you, okay? And I think that's important when people sort of get to that point and they realize, shoot, I should have done this a long time ago. Now I'm dealing with this emergency situation. That's what we're here for. That's what we're trained for. That's what we've helped so many people over the years with. We just encourage you to try and get there before that happens. But if you're there when it happens, there are always tools that we can use and different plans we can put into place to help an individual or their parents or their grandparents. I give a classic example is we talk a lot nowadays about dementia and other infirmities of the elderly population of the mind. And if you plan early enough, you can put steps in place so that you don't have to necessarily go to court, so that you can designate who you want to take care of you should you start to suffer some of these things. And that's part of that early planning. But so often we see that people didn't have those conversations and they come to us after someone's already started to show those signs. Well, there are things we can do as well during that time. We can go to court, we can get conservatorships, we can get guardianships. It's just more difficult. Frankly, it's more expensive, it's more time consuming, it's more stressful. And so it's not to say that without early planning you can't do anything. It's like Matt said, it's never too late. We just really encourage people to have that conversation earlier rather than later.
So Nick touched on a couple of good points there. One of the things that he mentioned was communication and ways that you can communicate. I think that's important for clients to understand is even though they may know that they need to communicate, how do they communicate with their loved ones to make sure that the preparations are made? Well, one is obviously drafting your estate planning documents. That's a great way to communicate what you want, who you want to be in charge, how you want your stuff distributed, how you want your assets to be utilized during your lifetime. By drafting an estate plan, a comprehensive estate plan, you are communicating with your family. Another way to do it is to have communication with them verbally and explaining to them, if something were to happen to me, these are the things that I'm concerned about, and these are the places I would like to be placed, or I want to stay in my home for as long as I can, or what their preferences are in an oral communication. And then lastly, another great way to communicate to our loved ones is to write them a letter and to say, look, if you're reading this is, obviously I won't be able to communicate my thoughts, but I'm telling you right now, when I'm of sound mind and body, that these are the things that I'm concerned about, and here's what I'd like to have happen. So those are three good ways to communicate. And that's directly with the family, and you don't necessarily need a lot of attorney involvement. Another way to communicate that we've done in the past is to have a family meeting where the family comes into our offices, we sit down, the attorney kind of leads the conversation and directs the conversation as to the important points that should be discussed if the individual can no longer participate in that conversation. So communication is definitely important. There's many different ways to do it. I've mentioned a few here today. There's no right or wrong way to communicate. The important thing is that the communication needs to be had. The last thing I want to mention about communication is it's important to involve all the family members. When you leave out a family member from the communication, and let's say it's just the client and their oldest child, then the other ones may feel left out. And what that does is that can breed contempt, and that can breed dishonesty. And so what we want to do is, even though it might be difficult, let's just lay it out on the table. If those are your wishes and that's what you want to communicate, that's okay. We want you to communicate, and be honest and forthright with everybody, but there's no need to hide it from anybody, because in order to carry out what it is you want to have done, it needs to be a team effort. So communication often, frequently, and with the entire family is vital to avoid complications down the road.
What Matt has talked about so far is the importance of communication, the importance of being open, the different ways that we can communicate. But one of the most important things that we have to consider, and this is important, I stress this for my clients who are the elderly parent who's now maybe frustrated with a child who's taking too active a role in their life, as well as with the child who maybe thinks mom or dad isn't listening enough, right? What I have to stress to them is that you are not going to agree on everything, okay? Both of you, parent, child, grandparent, aunt, uncle, all of you have opinions. And the most important thing, and I really like what Matt said about the family meeting, it's what I always try and do. The most important thing we can do is listen and respect that each of us is going to have different opinions. I think when you get people in a room listening, it might even be therapeutic. By no means are we trying to accomplish that, but you sometimes get the other side to understand where they're coming from. I can't tell you how many great breakthroughs I've seen with a client of mine talking to their child and saying, listen, I can do these things. And you have a child who's saying, I'm worried about you. And somewhere in the middle of that, they both come to a realization that, wait, we're both doing the same things. We're both thinking the same thing. We just want to be safe and protected and healthy going forward. We might just not understand how each of us sees the path forward on that. So that sort of communication, when you talk about differing opinions, that sort of communication is vital, that understanding. I stress it to each of my clients anytime we have this family type meeting, which is today's going to be an open conversation, and we're going to respect each other's opinions, even if we don't like them. And that's, once you start to get past that, you work. Now, one thing that I think bears mentioning, and this is something that as attorneys, we have to be very, very careful about, is while we're facilitating these conversations with family members, it's really important, Matt and I are firm believers in this, really important in delineating clearly who the client is. And for us, I tell everyone, hey, I'm here to facilitate, but you have to understand, if it's a child who's brought me her parent or his parent, and they're the ones doing all that, I need that child to understand you're asking me to represent your parents' best wishes. That's where my duties of loyalty lie. They are the client. And so it's really clear, because sometimes if you don't, and again, it's the same thing with attorneys and their clients as it is with the clients and their families. If you don't communicate that appropriately, if you don't make it clear from the beginning who the client is, how you're going to manage affairs, and who to whom your duty of loyalty lies, then later down the line, you might find a child who says, you know what? My attorney, not understanding what the roles are, isn't listening to me. They're listening to my mom. That's exactly what I didn't want. So I'm going to go find someone else. And really what you've done is a disservice. So I just thought it bared mentioning that it's one of the first things we discuss with our clients, especially when they're being brought, when it's an elderly parent being brought in by a child. One of the first things I discuss with the child, I usually have the parent speak with me individually and separately, and I try and establish those boundaries so that everyone is on the same page. Hey, we're working together, but this is who we're here for, this person, and this is who I'm here for as an attorney.
That goes along with, identifying who the client is and identifying what the objectives are up front goes a long way to getting everybody on the same path, to getting a good plan together for the future. The other thing I just want to mention, that, and you brought it up, is when you're talking to the family as a group, you have the ability to share your experiences. Unfortunately, the families only had their experience. And that's one of the things that the attorney brings to the table, is we've had hundreds of clients, and we've seen, umpteen different ways that things can happen. And so by us being able to direct that conversation early with the family and open those lines of communication and bring up things that they may not have thought about, we're able to work with the family together and get the best plan in place for the client.
Nick and Matt, thank you for sharing your thoughts on how to conduct some of these difficult conversations. They are hard to have, but so important, and so important to have early on in the planning process as well. Do you have any final thoughts?
The only thing I will say, and it's sort of rah-rah a little bit, but when we have these conversations with our clients, for everyone who's out there either struggling with an aging adult or aging parent or grandparent that maybe they aren't getting through to, remember why you're doing it. You're doing it for the most part because you want the best for them. And it's really important for me, when I see my clients, to have them all understand exactly that. And it really starts with what Matt said: communication, respect, understanding that you're going to have different opinions, and an ability to work together as a team. I think Matt made that reference to working as a team. To me, if you can keep those things in mind, it may not be perfect. Certainly with the help of an attorney, I think it'll be even better situated to get close to perfection. But you're going to be a lot better off than if you just wait till frankly, things have become difficult to deal with at home.
The other thing that I'd point out is that you just don't want any attorney. You want someone who is experienced in this area. If you can do it just among your family members, great, all the better. But if you're seeking out an attorney, I just point out that you want somebody with experience in the elder law area, if this is the road you want to go down, so that you can most effectively get a good plan together that is best for everybody involved.
For more information on elder law planning, head to Foster Swift's Elder Law blog at mielderlawblog.com.